What I want you guys to do first is look to the person next to you and wave goodbye. All right, very nice. I love the enthusiasm. Because ultimately, whenever my little digression today comes to a conclusion, I've never had a situation where people don't markedly say I'm a bit of a different person than I was when I started. So this is my little cute hook. So ultimately, what I'm about to share with you guys today, I work with guys like Elliot Hulse, Dan Henry, Brandon Carter. A lot of you guys have probably heard of some of these people. I'm not trying to necessarily flaunt, but how many of you guys, by the way, who knows who I am and you've heard of me in some way, shape, or form? A few of you have. And raise your hand if you have no idea who I am. Hopefully we can not only get somewhere, but also have some fun and try not to make too many bad jokes. Excellent. We have a system. I'm going to go into the methodology behind it, but I just want to let you know that on average, just by going through a process that is proprietary to us, but I've borrowed from a lot of different sources, I'm going to give you the backstory behind it, and hopefully it follows a wonderful hero's journey, epiphany bridge, and Eli claps from the back of the room and maybe does the Tony clap. We'll find out. But ultimately, on average, our clients almost double their income, increase their income by 78% within 90 days just by changing their mind. Usually people are pretty thrilled with 82% increase in focus, which we'll get into. But a couple disclaimers. This is not for everybody, so I'm going to share some things today that can at least invite a challenge of a lot of common religions, philosophies, and whatnot. So my intention isn't to stand up here and tell you, this is how it is, and you should believe what I say. My intention is just to share with you some things that have worked for me, for my clients, to help them do better in their lives and businesses. It's what helped me go from never making more than like 20, 30K in a year to making over $4.5 million in a 4-year span, building and selling a multi-7-figure agency. And I'm going to go through the whole story, but my point is there may be some conflicts of, wait a minute, guy, you said, and I'm just like, that's cool. I'm introducing you to a way of looking at things that has been very impactful, but what's true for you is true. And also, I always use this disclaimer, is how you show up for others is how others will show up for you. If you're just chilling, doing nothing, taking notes, I will probably call you out. I have a tendency to troll my audiences because it's fun, quite frankly. But also, how many of you guys want people to show up, pay attention to your shit? Show up and pay attention to other people's shit? That said, a little bit about my story. I was born in 1989. From 1989 to 2007, most of that I've deleted in terms of pictures and all that story, and you can imagine how good I must have felt about that time period to not keep any sort of really shred of pictures or whatnot. So I won't go necessarily into detail because everybody's got a fucked up childhood in some way, shape, or form. Mine had its own flavor of fucked up, but long story short, I know it was me. I just had no idea what to do with it. So like my parents sent me to like shrinks and psychiatrists and just told me I had problems, and I was just like, okay, I guess I have problems, and then that made me angry, and it was just like this compounding effect. I'd take that to school. My teachers would be like, I think your son's got a problem, and they'd be like, hey, you still have a problem. I'd be like, fucking apparently. It was this ever perpetuating cycle of, you're a piece of shit, and I'm like, why? And they're just like, because you're a piece of shit. And I'm like, oh, okay, then I guess I'm a piece of shit. So then I'd act like a piece of shit, and they'd tell me, you see. So that was at least my interpretation of those years from that perspective, not to be a victim or whatnot, but that was my experience of my first 18, 19 years. I fucking hated it, quite frankly. So I gravitated towards a sport called golf, individual sport. Didn't have to talk to other people, didn't have to work with other people. I could go mess around on my own and do my own thing. I got pretty good. I got a college scholarship. I ended up dropping out because I still couldn't figure out. I was a kid all throughout school who raised my hand in almost every grade saying, when am I going to use this in my life? And they'd be like, oh, that's insubordinate and churlish. And then they'd kick me out. Key and Peele reference. So I dropped out of college for pretty much the same reason. And I was just like, you know what? I don't want to do the college thing. So I attempted to play professional golf for a couple years. How many of you guys know how professional golf works? One guy. Okay, so it's like being in entrepreneurship, but the only way to actually make just a reasonable living would be to be on the Fortune 500 list. And anything other than that, you are a broke homeless person. This is like the ultimate meritocracy. There's no salaries. When I say sponsorship, your entry fee into an event, it's pay to play, it's organized gambling, because there's only a few televised events, and everybody who's trying to make it to the 150 guys that are on TV, there's 50,000 of them that on any given day they could plop into a PGA Tour event, they could probably win. Imagine that many people fighting for those spots. So I was just like, I can do it. I got to the end of the rope. I was operating at that point out of a, quote, sponsor's bank account. And when I say sponsor, it was some dude who just handed me some money and let me stay in a spare room in his shitty little condo, and it was a strange arrangement. There was no weird stuff involved. It was just a strange arrangement. I didn't have a bank account at that point in time. I didn't have any idea of like how the world worked. When I dropped out of college, my family was just like, we don't support that direction and don't ask me for help. And I was like, oh, fuck you. I want to follow my passion, follow my dream, do what I love to do. And you just give me the finger and you need me to sit in an Italian elective class in college because it's the right thing to do. I'm just like, does not compute. I also had zero emotional skill or self-control at the time. So my response was less of a response and more of a reaction of a big fat middle finger. Just to paint a picture of who did I used to be. And coming out of my realization that golf wasn't my direction. It was a very interesting time. Not to be too dark and morbid and paint a horrible picture, but just to give you an idea, like it was a 2mm shift from me probably not standing here. And so that is what spurred me into, okay, something's got to change. It's not going to be golf. Anything that I'd ever been like positively reinforced was the sport called golf. And it was just like mainly like when the ball went in the hole. It wasn't even like other people going like this. It was just like the ball went in the hole and I felt good about something that I did good for once. And anywho, I started into, quote, personal development. There I am at a UPW. Isn't that cute, this little guy? And I did the whole network marketing stuff and direct sales stuff and just got sucked into all of that. And it was a fascinating 6 years of beating my head against the wall. And I moved to 6 different states. Find a mentor and stand on the shoulders of giants, they said. I found a number of mentors. They ended up not being nearly as giant as they portrayed themselves to be, and 2 of them ended up being actual con men. It was a number of very fascinating experiences that I had the distinct privilege of going through, but during those years, I didn't make enough taxable income to file taxes. It wasn't great. That's when you don't even need to file a tax return. That's when you know something needs to change. So I have 6 different states. At this point, I'm in Portland, Oregon. How many of you guys been to Portland? Okay. So I'm in Portland, Oregon. This dude that I actually met at a Tony event said, hey, I have this big, fancy, awesome, perfect janitorial and maintenance company that does all the big corporate janitorial contracts. He's like, come sell for me. I'm like, okay, great. I move up there with, I don't know, I might have had $300, something in that realm. I had enough gas to get there. Stayed in some random dude who worked there for a while until I had a first paycheck and then got a really shitty apartment. But I was like, this is gonna be it. So anyway, I'm there for probably 10, 11 months, and there's a consultant that comes in, and the long and short of it is he and I hit it off a bit. He was a salesy marketing guy and whatnot, but he was also, there's a book that I'll point you guys to that I wrote earlier this year that kind of details this story a little bit. Not that this isn't in detail, but I called him the Gucci man. He had a Gucci suit, he had these gator shoes, he looked like a baller. Right? And I was just like, I sure don't. And he just really portrayed himself well. And so I was like, I want to hang around this guy. And he started sharing some things with me. And this is after I had been to every Tony Robbins event by hook or by crook. I weaseled my way in there. I pirated all the programs and stuff. I had read tons of books, and I was still a baroque piece of shit, basically. And I was just like, I'm doing affirmations, incantations, meditation, fuck, you name it. I had done it. I drank the Kool-Aid, brushed my teeth with the Kool-Aid, bathed in the Kool-Aid, took a shower in the Kool-Aid, and I just smelled like old sticky Kool-Aid, and it was not good. So he started sharing with me some things that were almost the exact antithesis to everything that I had thought was the answer. And I was like, that's interesting, but it also makes more sense with what's being shared. the conversation just kept continuing on, and we drove around Portland, honestly selling janitorial and maintenance. Like, we just literally walk into buildings, and I'll tell you, it's the easiest thing to sell because nobody is in sales in that. They're just like, you're competing against paint-covered overalls Hector, who isn't the sales guy. And so all I had to do was wear a suit, and people were like, oh, you guys must be good. That was literally it. So dress to impress, that especially in an industry where nobody dresses. Fun fact. So it got to a point to where I'm like, where are you getting all this stuff? Because I feel like at this point, I was the guy who could probably say all the personal development stuff to you, but obviously a screw was loose. And I'm like, where are you getting all this stuff? And he said, there's a good friend of mine that I could probably arrange an introduction. He's helped me quite a bit, and he works with a handful of very high net worth individuals. He's very private, he's very off-grid, and he uses a fake name for a number of reasons. So for that reason, I can't give you a whole lot of information. You'll never guess who it is, I promise you that. But he said, I can introduce you, and perhaps he might be able to shed some additional light. And so now I'm intrigued. And he was just outside of LA. I call him my secret Yoda. I go to LA for a weekend and meet the guy, and immediately I'm just like, okay. He shared with me this concept that I'm gonna break down for you guys today, that once he shared it with me, I'm like, if what you're saying is true. At first, my bullshit alarm was like, all of LA heard it, probably all of the West Coast. And I was like, but if what he's saying is true, even remotely true, I gotta know. For my own, I gotta know. It was one of those things, how many of you guys have ever read a mystery book or watched a mystery movie, and then you're just like, you can't put it down, you can't stop watching, you gotta watch the next episode to find out what happened? Like, you just had to know. Anybody have that experience? Yeah? So that was me. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those turning points in my life where one road leads to somewhere and one road leads to somewhere else. And I was just like, I will not be able to live with myself if I don't find out if this guy's even like half right. So I did. It was like a Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi type of a situation. You'd think a guy who works with some pretty high net worth individuals would live in like a baller mansion, drive a Rolls, like he'd be decked out. This is his little back patio that 4 days a week, 6 hours a day for 2.5 years. I went up there, packed a lunch. He has literally a wood burning stove in his house. It was literally Yoda, okay? It was exactly what you wouldn't expect. The packaging did not help at all, but best person I've ever met ever. And we're still very close. So I ended up working with him and understanding a lot of things that I'm gonna break down for you today that hopefully maybe shift some things for you. But coming out of that, I had a realization that I have been looking for all of these people, find these mentors, especially you NLP somebody enough to really believe that they need somebody else and they can't do it themselves. A lot of this stuff, just as a quick disclaimer, now that I'm in the trenches with all of this, I saw a disclaimer back in the day. There was some really aggressive pickup artist webinar that I watched at one point. And the disclaimer in the beginning of it was something to the effect of what you're about to hear, you can use to totally destroy people and ruin their lives and whatever, or you can use it to get the woman of your dreams and do really well and stuff. A lot of that 2.5 years was spent getting rid of that I needed somebody outside of myself. So I'd move from state to state, always thinking that he knew better, she knew better, he knew better. And I had this realization that I'm the one I've been looking for this whole time. And it hit me. Now, I had to go through 6 years of, you go into a company, they're like, we have everything figured out. And then you go in and they don't have fucking anything figured out. And even my broke dumb ass knew that they didn't have everything figured out. And I'm just like, this is dumb. I was sold a bill of goods. Do it again, 6 years in a row. That sucked. So I realized that, okay, I'm it. From that point, from that decision, in 18 months, I built and sold a multi-seven-figure, 386, I think it was 386 client agency. There's me with hair. I sold somewhere around 3,500 to I think it was 3,800, something like that, courses on how we did it for a lot of different reasons, which is a whole separate story. I'm like, I don't want to be the agency lead gen guy anymore. And the main driving reason for that is I knew at that point the difference that had made the difference. Let's assume for a second I'm not full of shit. Right? This must be some pretty powerful ass shit that I'm about to share with you, right? It has to be. Either that or I'm just I've somehow just weaseled my way all the way to Eli's apartment today. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. And so I was sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick of getting lead gen questions when I know that I have real diamonds to offer people. And when I started my agency, it wasn't to start an agency. It was because I knew if I started sharing what I went through, people wouldn't buy it had I not done some normal people business success stuff to show that I even had a clue as to what I was talking about, because fortunately or unfortunately, that's what people look at. And so I was like, I now have the opportunity to really sit down and lay out, how do I want to reproduce a one-on-one thing that I went through very intensely for 2.5 years and put that into a scalable business model, because I couldn't charge enough to work one-on-one with people with what I had gone through. And so for 6 months, I sat out by the pool and said, first of all, what would I do right now if I had $1 billion? I just didn't have to work. And I said I would share what I went through. And I would, honestly, my exact words were, I would like to sit around and hypothecate about the universe with people I love and get paid millions of dollars to do it. And for 6 months, I just sat down and engineered what ended up being called the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Program. We've done quite well. It's made a lot more than 20 grand a year, and I do now have to file taxes, which is both a very awesome thing and a very unfortunate thing at the same time. This is my Mint account. When I first learned this perspective until today, grown quite well, but you'll notice the long haul in the beginning of that of almost nothing. So anywho, a little long drawn out, but this story has led to us be doing some cool stuff. That's my wife, Melissa. My little puppy dog, Charlie, was hanging out with Russell, even though that's not the X award, that one's coming. We just got back from the Bahamas. We had a great wedding. In fact, we just took, you guys know who Brandon Carter is? So, relatively famous guy, a few million followers. Anyway, he's one of my one-on-one clients. We went to the Bahamas, this was a week and a half ago, and Eli and I just redid my office. How many of you guys know what you should be doing to get to the next level, but you have a hard time getting yourself to do those things consistently, day in and day out, in some way, shape, or form? Anybody have everything that you know you're doing everything perfectly? Wow, you guys, people who didn't raise their hand? That's amazing. Congratulations. All right. Literally nothing for you. You're like totally doing everything perfectly? Oh, okay. Okay. So it's an honest question. I want to know, like, how many of you guys feel as though there's some things that you could do better that you know you should be doing better or more consistently, but you have sometimes a tough time getting yourself to actually do it? All right, cool. How's that for forcing an answer out of an audience? You like that? He's holding up cue cards in the back of the room. You just say that again, but stronger. All right. How many of you guys want to grow your business? All right, I just want to make sure we're in the right room. So when you fail, thumbs up if it makes you feel awesome, thumbs down if it makes you feel not so good. Right. So, as our boy Warren Buffett says, if you can't manage your emotions, you can't manage money. Everybody's got some shit, right? How many of you guys want a proven process to clear fear totally within a few minutes? Awesome. So, how many of you guys know you have the next level within you and you're just trying to get it out? Say yes. All right, excellent. All right, great. So here's why. Do you make better decisions drunk or sober? Sober. Thank you. How about, do you make better decisions when you're fearful, frustrated, upset in some way, or when you're calm, when you're poised? Thank you. Now, that's because when you're worried, anxious, or frustrated, you're mentally drunk. Okay? So the problem with traditional quote-unquote mindset, all the how-tos, the routines, the information, the habits, seminars, scripts, blueprints, formulas, is it's adding new information on top of a drunk mind. And so if you're hammered black, you ever been blackout drunk? Yeah, if I gave you the best business growth blueprint in the world and you're hammered drunk, would you be able to do anything with it? No. So is the solution to alter the blueprint, give it to you harder? Is it to rearrange it in some way? Or is it to sober you up? Less drunk. How much less drunk? All the way, right? The problem that I had seen, and we're going to unpack what does this look like and then what do we do about it. The problem that I had seen is all this stuff is just dumping, oh, it's great information, but you're going to make worse decisions. You're going to have a different perspective if you're essentially mentally drunk. So when you're fearful, when you're frustrated, when you're angry, when you're annoyed, when you're really excited about something, which we're going to unpack too, all of that is a variation of mental drunkenness. Some of it is I'm a little buzzed and I had one cocktail, or I'm blacked out. Either way alters perception. If you're with me, say yes. All right, so what the hell do we do about it? So this presentation is actually, this has lasted 2.5 years so far, and it's still the foundation. It's still pretty solid. It's the 8 secrets to get rid of fear, doubt, and frustration to become a bulletproof entrepreneur. It's created some dope results. Now, how many of you guys would feel that your business and life would be better if you had 82% more focus and 47% less fear, right? Like, how are you measuring that? We have a process that I'll share with you if you guys want at the end. It's not exactly part of this, but we quantify everything. Let me ask you this. How many of you guys want time freedom and financial freedom? Say yes. Okay. Well, there's a guy named Adolf Merkel. Anybody hear of Adolf Merkel? He is a now past German billionaire. You'd think he had it all. He was in some business deal that went a little sideways and he lost $300 million and still had $100 million left. He stepped in front of a train and killed himself. Left behind 4 kids, a wife, and $800 million. You'd think he had it all. How many of you guys would like $800 million? Say yes? Yes. Right, he fucking killed himself. So is financial freedom and time freedom really the thing, or is mental freedom real freedom? Because time freedom, financial freedom comes and goes, right? Elon Musk got all the money in the world. Also, he's pulled in 76 different directions, probably can't go out in public. Is he really free? You'd think he's free, but is he really free? You start to look at freedom a little bit differently. Real freedom is mental freedom, the ability to lose it all, the ability to have it all. How many of you guys have ever been afraid or hesitated to fire somebody way too long? Say yes? Right. It's because mental drunkenness steps in and it costs you more money as a result of that. And so we shoot ourselves in the foot because of our emotions. We get mentally drunk and we start doing dumb shit. And so the more free you are, your ability to create and destroy should be equal. So you can only create to the degree that you're willing to destroy. So if you really want to create, but can't fire anybody, can't nix a project that isn't gaining legs, but you have sunk cost bias, and so you just keep investing in it. How many of you guys have done that with some sort of a project or maybe a crypto recently, right? So our methodology is, we call it the trinity of freedom. He's got a trinity, I've got a trinity. It also plays on the Matrix reference, I don't know. But mental freedom, free your mind, free your time, and master your money. What I've found, and I'll just touch on the time freedom thing, is for those of you guys who, for honestly anybody, if you don't have the results that you want, quite frankly, you're just not spending your time as wise as you possibly could. No shit. And so there's time frameworks that we take our clients through, as well as mental frameworks, as well as money frameworks, and that goes with tracking. A lot of you guys are relatively well off in your businesses, but how many of you guys religiously track your business KPIs like on a daily or weekly basis? Who doesn't track your business KPIs? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. We work with our clients on specifically basics of finances. You'd be amazed. I promise you, people don't pay enough attention to where exactly they're at, where exactly they're going, and have any sort of a fucking clue as to how to get there. They don't track shit. And it's, if you're lost in a forest and I say, where are you? And you can't send any sort of a location beacon, nor can you tell me where you want to go, what the fuck are we doing here? And that's like how 99% of businesses are run, and it's terrifying. So you can't really feel that great if you don't know where you are or where you're going. So we handle all of those 3 things, and essentially we're the bolt-on for all of the how-to programs out there that teach you the mechanics, but all the intangibles is what we handle. So my goal is to help 100,000 entrepreneurs become mentally free. Why? It's because it's arbitrary and it sounds cool and it gives me something to shoot at, but ultimately I want to create the biggest ripple effect on this planet. I had a decision. It was actually the first version of Bulletproof Entrepreneur. It was called the Bulletproof Mind, and I was going to sell it as just a low-ticket, scalable, direct webinar thingy do, because at that point, I didn't want to talk to people, quite frankly. I'm done with agency, coaching, and I realized real quick after a quick little beta launch that I attracted with that all of the crystal-wielding, woo-woo, broke, fortune teller wannabe type people. And I said, you know what, this isn't where I'm going to have the biggest impact because they're not really interacting with a lot of people, but business owners are, and my story just happens to adhere to that. Plus I can charge a lot more and I can prove a direct ROI. It's nice. But ultimately, you guys have teams, you guys have families, you guys have a lot of clients. They touch a lot of people. So if I can help you essentially expand just a little bit more, get a little bit more out of yourself, that's going to translate to your team, which is going to translate to their performance, which is going to translate to their families, and so on and so forth. So I just figured this is probably the best way to take what I went through and hopefully spread it And also the capitalist in me also needs to make millions of dollars to do it as well. So how many of you guys are also capitalists that want to make millions of dollars? Say yes. All right, cool. So we're all in this together. So who here wants to become mentally free? Say yes. Awesome. So secret number one is you're already the powerhouse. I already alluded to this with the one thing. There's this quote by Alan Watts. How many of you guys know who Alan Watts is? Say yes. I like Alan. Seems to be a relatively enlightened cat to some degree, but he says, what you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. And you are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real, deep down you is the whole universe. Now, just let that sink in for a second. Let's try that on as a belief. It's fucking crazy, right? That means that I'm your me. It means that you're me as well. That means you're him as well. It means that also you're that couch, you're that water bottle, you're all those people out there that you've never met before. Think of what that means. You're the whole universe. That's a lot of responsibility. You're also like, okay, I'm just like this dude, right? Or this woman. Let's expand this a little bit and just try that on. Again, what's true for you is true, but try this on. You're not a body. A body is something that you have, not something that you are. What do I mean by this? When you refer to your body parts, and especially when you have all these guys that refer to how the brain makes decisions, the brain this, you don't say I'm brain, you say my brain. Whose? Mine. So that must mean, by definition, everybody knows instinct. Anybody here say I'm brain? No. So instinctively you know that you're not a brain. You have a brain. You have a brain. You don't say I'm elbow, you don't say I'm knee, you say my elbow, you say my knee. Right? And when you die, you don't lose weight immediately, right? There's just something that leaves. And if you're not a body, then what are you? You're a mind? Well, let's look. What is a mind? A mind, by definition, at least the definition that we use, is a memory bank containing mental image pictures or recordings from the past. So we're going to break that down. And really, what is the mind versus what is the brain, which is part of the body? You've heard of the mind, body, soul, trinity, right? How many of you guys have heard of this? Yes? Well, I tend to be a bit polarizing because I unintentionally shit on a lot of what is traditional psychology and brain shit. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about amygdalas and brain chemicals and stuff. I'm going to talk about what is, I'll say, worked for me as a philosophy, as a viewpoint, has been very freeing. A memory bank containing mental image pictures. We're going to come back to that. But the real you is an infinitely intelligent, conscious being, as Alan said in his own words. A part of you that's aware of being aware. It's the decision maker, all right? So you are the decision maker. For example, when other guys are talking about, oh, your brain secretes like cortisol when you're stressed, and so you got to manage your cortisol levels to manage your stress levels. It's the drunk driver crashed the car, but instead of sobering up the driver, you took the car into the mechanic. Pretty dumb, right? So Eli and I were talking about this. I'm going to ask him a question in a little bit about, there's a bell that I think went off in Eli's head. Because for a minute he's just like, yeah, okay, cool theory. And then there was a moment where he was just like, that makes some fucking sense. And so what most, I'll say, things that you try to do better and fix yourself, and even if it's just, my man was asking me about like Adderall and modafinil and stuff. It's, I don't care how good your car is. Right? Body being the car, brain being the car. If you're a drunk driver, it won't matter how nice your Pagani is. You guys with me? Say yes? Okay. You are the driver, your body's the car. You're a lot bigger than you think you are too. Tony, for example. How many of you guys have ever seen Tony speak live? Okay. You, much bigger than body. So when Tony enters a room, how many of you guys have ever felt like this electric energy, like right before he entered the room, but you actually felt this energy enter the space before you actually saw his body? Or you've been to a concert and somebody walked on stage. Right before they got on stage, there's electric energy and you felt it. Anybody have that experience? Say yes. Or anybody have the experience of, you know, somebody's staring at you and you turn around and they sure as shit they're staring at you. You ever had that situation? You're like, what the fuck was that? Right? Well, what it is it's actually them. And you're actually much bigger for the most part, especially the more success you have, the bigger and more expansive being you are and must be, because you have to command much more space. When Eli commands a room, he commands the entire space. You guys feel that? Right? For me, to a degree, I am, at least with my intention, I'm just trying to permeate this space, right? So what happens is you have all these other people, and this beingness person kind of impinges on this guy's little universe, and he feels it. Turns around, oh, you're looking at me. Your attention unit is over here. It has nothing to do with the guy's body, does it? At all. Whatsoever. So there's something. There must be something. Can we agree that there must be something that somehow travels around, doinks this guy in the back of the head so he turns around, right? What the fuck is that? That's you. That's you. The real you. So you're a lot bigger than you think you are. So for example, regardless of your political leanings, Donald Trump, enormous being. What he decides to do with that is not my point, but enormous being. When he has rallies of 60,000 people, just like totally like commands that space. Shit commands space, not even in the same state. And so the bigger a being, the more expansive a being, the more space that you can command, and the more space that you can command, the more people you can influence, the more people you can influence, the more money you make ultimately as a business owner, right? That said, what the hell is this mind thing? You are the one who looks at the mind. Right now, I want everybody to close your eyes and recall your last meal. Just bring it up in your mind's eye and raise your hand when you've got your last meal in your mind's eye. Excellent. And now what I want you to do is just re-experience maybe 30 seconds of that. If you use silverware, feel the silverware in your hand and do your best to feel the physical sensation. Feel the food in your mouth, taste the food, feel the texture. And raise your hand once you've got this experience happening and you can feel the actual physical sensations in your mouth, in your hand. Okay, cool. Open your eyes. So what the hell just happened? What the fuck just happened there? So what happened was, the mind is what? A collection of mental image pictures. And I usually color code this blue, black, and red. We got pink. Pink is red. This is mind, black is body, and blue is you. For the sake of time, I'm using the pink. So what we just did is you decided to call in this mental image picture that included smell, sight, touch, taste, and sound. And what you did is you re-experienced that, but all by your command now. Your brain didn't do this. Your mind didn't do this. You decided to pull in a picture. You looked at it. Your body then responded with the physical sensations. Do you guys see? It went you, mind, body is the hierarchy of how this goes. You guys see this? Say yes. Okay. So it all starts with you. For Eli and I, we're having this conversation because there are many philosophies out there that say start with the body, fix the body. The only way that actually works is you start to see a little shred of evidence that this is working. Therefore, you decide that the mind is going to change because we'll get to this in a second, but the body is in the mind. The body is energy charged particles made of atoms. So is the mind. They all have a mass or a weight to them. The body is in the mind and you command them both. So if you're drunk and now you're driving and the car crashes, there's a whole industry on fixing the body so that you feel better. And Eli and I were talking about this because he's got some challenges that he said have been a bit chronic, and we were having a conversation about it. He's like, yeah, I've tried all this body stuff, and it's still fucking there. And I'm like, if the driver is drunk, not that Eli's drunk, but we have our own ways of being drunk. That's just a cute analogy to paint a picture. But we have our own ways of being drunk. And if we're mentally drunk, then the body is responding to the mind, and we're making decisions based on that mental drunkenness. We're probably not going to make the smartest decisions to come up with the smartest solutions. Therefore, we're going to have incorrect diagnoses. Therefore, we're going to have incorrect solutions for a given problem. If the driver's blackout drunk, you can keep fixing the car with Joe's 8-step process to have a perfect car forever, and Sam's 4-step solution to never have a car problem again. And you can do all of it for 40 years and it'll never work. Why? Because the driver's still drunk. You guys with me? Say yes? A little different, huh? So you have a body, you have a mind, but you are you, the infinitely intelligent being that makes shit happen, the decision maker, okay? So when, like everybody knows, in order to lose weight, you eat less calories and you work out more. Everybody knows. But 75% of the US is still obese. Everybody knows that formula. Yet there's a multi-billion-dollar industry on the what-to-dos. So everybody knows the what-to-dos, run around and eat better. So knowledge isn't the problem. We got to remove the mental blocks, the mental drunkenness that keeps us from making the smartest decisions regarding that area of life or any area of life. You guys with me? Say yes? Okay, cool. Secret number 2 is your mind is the obstacle. So the mind is a collection of mental image pictures, okay? And they all have an energy or a charge connected with them. So that meal that you guys just pictured, how many of you guys had a good meal? Raise your hand. And anybody have a shitty meal? Raise your hand. Eli had a shitty meal. So what is energy before we break that down? So energy is the potential of motion or power. It comes from the forcing of space between terminals. The fuck does that mean? What that means is it's like a battery. So in a battery, you have 2 terminals, a positive and a negative. So for those of you, most of you raised your hand, said you had a good meal. You had more reasons that it was good than reasons it was bad. Raise your hand if this is true. Okay. So for those of you, Eli, who had a bad meal, you have a slightly bad, so his reasons for being bad slightly outweighed reasons it was good. In this case, that meal that y'all just had, if it was good, had a positive net charge to it. Make sense? Okay. And Eli's had a slight net negative charge. Again, when you're worried, anxious, frustrated, you're mentally drunk, and here's why. Moments that include pain, hurt, disappointment, guilt, shame, resentment, anything that's unwanted, okay? They all tend to stick in the mind because they have more negatives than positives. And for example, picture a 4-year-old girl playing out on the front yard and dog comes by, bites her arm. She's on green grass next to a white picket fence, blue sky, sunny day at 72 degrees in front of a blue house, and her mom, brunette, wearing an orange dress, comes out and starts screaming, "Oh my God, this is awful." Okay? You guys got that picture? So in that case, this girl has stored all of that experience as bad or negative. And so what happens is everything in that event gets stored as bad or negative. All of this tends to stack and accumulate, and there are varying degrees of bad. You might have heard people talk about this as quote-unquote trauma. Trauma doesn't necessarily mean you got robbed at gunpoint, punched in the face, and kicked in the nuts, okay? That might be traumatic for somebody, right? But trauma could also just be like, I was about to speak, and somebody said that my voice sounded a little weird today, and then I went on stage, and I didn't do so well because I was a bit introverted on how my voice sounded. That's like a 1 out of 100 maybe traumatic experience, but it's still stored, right? And so to that degree, everything in that event is stored with we'll say a degree of 1 negative charge, okay? And so in that particular incident, green equals grass equals mom equals orange equals dress equals sky equals 72 degrees equals sun equals clouds equals blue equals white picket fence. Everything is all looped in. So how many of you guys have ever been in a relationship and your partner acted irrationally? Say yes. All right, here's why that happens to a large degree. And again, I'm blanketing concepts here. There are some nuances, so I'm blanketing this. But let's say that girl grows up, arm heals, whatever, and she gets married. She's 42 years old, and the husband really wants a house with a white picket fence. He wants it to be blue, wants it to have a nice green lawn. He says, honey, I think we should move to this neighborhood that has these beautiful houses. They have white picket fences. And she immediately says, I don't want a fucking white picket fence. He's like, what the holy fuck is this? And now he's just, what do you mean? She's just like, they're fucking terrible. They're ugly. I hate them. He's just like, what do you mean they're ugly? Why are you acting this way? Anybody ever experienced something like this? Say yes. The reason has nothing to do with white picket fences. Nothing to do with white picket fences. And side note, given that you guys are all in sales and you're trying to handle objections with your speaking ability and your sales processes, right? You're trying to handle objections, shift beliefs, get them to say yes. Yes? All right, see, it works. So every objection, Eli and I were talking about this, is a smokescreen. I need to think about it. I don't have enough time. They're all bullshit, right? We can agree that they're all bullshit. If it actually delivered on the promise, you'd make time and so forth. You've heard all the arguments. Okay, cool. In the mind, everything that gets you to stop yourself in some way or everything that gets you to act irrationally is also a smokescreen. The smokescreen objection at this point is white picket fences are ugly. Maybe they aren't, but it's a smokescreen for what's really going on, and she's not even conscious of it. Most people are drunk and they don't fucking know it. Have you ever tried to talk a friend out of being not drunk when they're hammered and they're making an ass out of themselves? Anybody tried to do this? Say yes. Yeah. You go and try to, or talk yourself out of not being drunk. Anybody been too drunk in a cab? You're laughing. You've been in the cab. I've been in the cab on the way home trying to just be like, all right, 5 more minutes. We got this. Don't throw up. Don't throw up. You got this. Anybody ever been there? Say yes. Right. So what you're trying to do is convince a drunk person, a drunk mind, to not be drunk when they don't know that they're drunk. And it's really challenging because it's like trying to handle. How many of you guys have tried to handle like the I don't have time objection? You found hours of time for them and they still didn't buy. Say yes? It's because they didn't know they were drunk. And you handled the objection that there wasn't the real objection. The mind, that's how the mind works. That's why the mind feeds smokescreen objections, is it because it calls up all this stuff and it covers you. So these little, the blue is you, the red is the mind. So it's like this lens. Anybody ever wear drunk goggles or do that drunk goggle thing where you put on the drunk goggles and it looks like everything's all warped? Anybody do this? Say yes? Okay, so if not, there's these things you can buy called drunk goggles. You put them on and it skews everything and it's, oh shit, I'm drunk. That's what happens. And most people are walking around with drunk goggles. And especially if you call them out and be like, you're wearing drunk goggles, they'd be like, no, I'm fucking not. I'm not wearing drunk goggles. You're insane. It's most of the population. It's most of the population. Y'all are wondering why it's a bit, how many of you guys see that it's a bit fucked up out there? Say yes? That's why. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. As a side note, selfishly, I'm hoping for the love of God that we can eliminate some of this and have some kind of a ripple effect in the opposite direction, because that's what's happening. So what happens is the mind skews your perception of the present and the future, and it gives you an unclear perception of reality, and your mind just acts as a drunk goggle. And so most people, and they have no idea that they have it on. And then you try to tell them, and they go, no, I don't. I need a better how-to program. I know what's best for me. Anybody ever experienced that stupid-ass fucking objection? Right? They're like, oh, I know what's best. Really? The fuck did you get yourself into this shitty position if you know it was best? Doesn't make any sense. It's a smokescreen. How many of you guys have felt like this in your business at some point? Say yes. Right? All that is once that happens, and every time that happens, they're all stored, and the mind acts like a mirror. So this was girl getting bit by a dog, I think, in a stick figure fashion in the past. So this is past, present, future. The mind acts like a mirror. If it happened once, the mind projects it to happen again in the future, okay? And it does it with everything in that event, including the things you're like, oh yeah, that's why she hates dogs. But we still can't figure out why she just doesn't want to get anywhere near the dirt. She hates to get dirty. Seemingly unrelated. Traditional therapy wouldn't go that direction. They would go an entirely different direction, because it's a smokescreen and it's unrelated and they're not even conscious of it. So all of this, I can't stress this enough, is it's all fucking tangled up together. And that's why it's so hard when you go and do direct, like a therapy or a cute little trick. You can do cute little tricks that work short term to shift little stuff. But how many of you guys have ever done some sort of like a board breaking thing and you broke through a fear and you felt great, and then 3 days later, 2 days later, maybe even 2 hours later, started sinking on in again? Anybody ever experienced that? Say yes. The reason is that's a parlor trick. It's like taking an aspirin when you know you have a brain tumor. You can take all the aspirin in the world, get the best aspirin in the world, take as much as you want, and it won't solve the problem. The challenge is the way traditional things handle the mind is in a very, oh, it's conscious, therefore I'm going to handle the conscious thing and that should handle it. It might, but most of the time it doesn't. And then you have people that are just trying to sell themselves on it did for a really long time and convince themselves and lie to themselves that it actually made a difference when they know deep down it didn't. But they have sunk cost bias because they went home and told all their friends it was the best, most breakthroughing thing in the world. And now they have to fucking commit to that identity and live with that, even though they're slowly dying a slow I'm lying to myself death as their life goes on. We're gonna unpack that, not to be too dark and morbid, but this is why most traditional shit, A, doesn't last, and B, quite frankly, doesn't work, and all it does is just sell you on the fact that it worked, but it actually didn't. Does that make sense? Okay. So all this shit stored with a negative charge, and it stacks not just with fear, but with literally everything. Anger, resentment, frustration, self-doubt, guilt, grief, loss, depression, and even infatuation, which we'll get to in a minute. So all of that is mental drunkenness. Mentally sober, in this case, let's say this girl encounters a little puppy. Mentally sober, she maybe encounters a new, cute, little, harmless puppy. The truth is, it's a friendly little puppy, but the mentally drunk mind comes over and says, no, it's a rabid, horrible, hyena-looking dog. And she goes, oh no. It's like the cutest teddy bear dog ever, right? The lens perception is dangerous, avoid in that particular case. And again, it's not just all fear, it's with literally everything you don't ever want to feel. How do we take this lens off? How do we get rid of this is your question. How do we get rid of this? In simple terms, here's our battery, Here's our positive, here's our negative. How many of you guys remember in 5th grade math class, algebra, who's the brainiac that knows when 4x equals 4x in equation, what do we get to do? Say again? Keep guessing. When 4x equals 4x, what do you get to do? It rhymes with schmansel schmout. Cancel out. And when you cancel these out, this equals 0. So when you have a balanced equation, it equals 0, and the definition of 0 is nothing there. Make sense? If I have an event that has a whole bunch of perceived negatives, essentially, if I strategically and understand how to thoroughly balance out this equation, now all of a sudden, the thing that had a net negative electric charge now has a net neutral charge. And when it has a net neutral 0 charge, it goes away. And when it goes away, what's all that's left? All that's left is the truth. As they say, the truth will set you free, but first, it will piss you off. So the truth, the real you, the confident, powerful, rational thought, calm, collected, focused, real being that is you, that is the whole universe. That's all that's left when you get rid of it all. And so I saw this concept and I said, if that fucking shit is true, I want to know. And I invested 2.5 years of my life, thousands of hours to not only have that facilitated with me in a very specific, imagine like laser-sighted fucking seek and destroy every little last fucking imbalance in the fucking mind. I had a lot, took 2.5 years, a lot. But I also wanted to understand the other side of it. I wanted to understand how to do that, because if I can do that, I can understand what the fuck I just experienced and even have a shred of helping other people through that, I know I'll be able to make the best difference that I believe that I can possibly make for people. And that's what I'm sharing with you. So all that's left is you, the real you, okay? And this is the anatomy of how you and the mind and the body basically all interact with each other. But why is that the case? Because everything is naturally balanced. It's a universal truth. There's a principle called the principle of polarity. It states everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. And unlike are the same, opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. It's where extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths, all paradoxes may be reconciled. What the fuck does that mean? It means that everything has two sides. So cold, hot, negative, positive, bad, good, dark, light, down, up, they're all two sides of the same coin. And they happen on a gradient scale. Most people, how many of you guys have ever been in an argument and the other person was like, you always do that? Anybody ever experienced that? You always say that. You're never there. That's obviously bullshit. But what the mind wants to do is speak in very binary terms, and nothing is binary. It's all on a gradient scale. We're going to unpack this, but that's what the mind wants to do. Notice, negative, positive. These are charged particles. These are charged things. Do you have charged things? Yes or no? You, mind, body. Do you have charged shit? No. So that exists where? In the mind. Is the mind you? No. Interesting. For example, hot and cold are two sides of the same coin called temperature. So how many of you guys, let's say it's 100 degrees outside. How many of you guys would say, somebody said, hey, is it hot out today? How many of you guys would say, yes, it's a hot day at 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside? Okay, anybody say that? Would go, no, it's freezing out? Would anybody say that? Okay, so that being said, we got to put Earth at 100 degrees Fahrenheit over here. We can all agree on that, yeah? Okay, so we can agree that's true. I know I'm leading you with my tonality. It's true until we realize that Venus's average temperature is 864 degrees Fahrenheit. Shit. Now we got to move Earth 8 times colder. We got to put Venus over there on hot. We got to put Earth over there on cold. If it was 100 degrees on Venus, all the Venusians would be like, yo, bring a coat today, bro. It is fucking cold out. Would they not? So that said, how many of you guys see now that the real truth is Earth is cold and Venus is hot? Say yes? Oh my God, but what about our sun? It's 9,941 degrees Fahrenheit. Now Earth's freezing. Venus, you're definitely going to want to bring a coat. And now the sun is hot. What's the point? The truth is, it's just temperature. There's no such thing as hot and cold. There's no such thing as bad and good. There's no such thing as up and down. It's all relative. But there's one more law that is very important here. It's called the law of conservation of energy. It states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, rather it can only be transformed or transferred from one form to another. Okay, what does that mean? That means based on the law of conservation of energy, there must be equal sides to everything. There must be. It's there. Now, whether we're blackout drunk and can't see it or not is a different story. But can we agree that it's there? Say yes? Okay. The two universal laws, I don't care what religion, philosophy, or quantum physics that you study, they're all saying the same thing. Okay? So that means there's equal rich in every poor, equal big in every small, equal win in every loss, equal benefit to every drawback, equal love in every hate, equal courage in every fear. It's there. It's there. That means just like the temperature that you saw is only hot, the event that you saw is only negative, actually has perfectly equal positives, and I'm putting very blanket statements on this, but has perfectly equal positives that exist, correct? They have to be there. And so what happens is when you balance them out, just like in math class, they do cancel each other out, and that charge goes away. How many of you have ever been holding on to something that you didn't want to admit, and then you finally were like, hey man, I stole the brownies. Thank God I got that off my chest, I feel better. Anybody have that experience where they got something off their chest and felt better, lighter, and maybe even felt like a tingly, like a visceral, some sort of sensation while that was happening? What happens is there's charges and flows. So in that particular case, we'll call it, you had all this pent up charge, i.e. a stuck flow of energy. It was stuck in. And so you balanced that equilibrium between the inner and the outer, and that energy dissipated, and it actually got lighter because now all of a sudden you're like, okay, fuck it, I'm going to admit it. Therefore, there must be equal positives in admitting it than negatives in keeping it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have admitted it. And so the moment that you did that, this heavy charge that you were carrying around with you literally went away, and that's why you actually felt lighter, and it is atomically actually measurable with certain instruments. It's pretty interesting. You wonder why, is because we have protons, and we have neutrons, and we have electrons and atoms. And since we're made up of that shit, and so is our mind, when this shit's imbalanced, we feel heavy. We're carrying more mass. That's why you have a lot of people. How many of you guys have ever seen the show Hoarders? Say yes. How many of you guys have ever seen a very skinny hoarder? No. They're pulling in mass. They have a lot of mental clutter. Their physical universe is a representation of what's going on in their mental universe. They have severe, enormous imbalances and stuck flows. The good news is they can be relatively simply unstuck and reversed, and that's essentially what we're talking about here. So when you're feeling mentally heavy, you tend to pull in physical mass as well. Fun fact. So when you get rid of all that shit, and by the way, all of that exists only where? In the mind. It's not the real you. It doesn't exist in your body. It doesn't exist over there on the corner. It exists in your mind only. And given that you have the actual ability to control your mind, you can do something about it. Or you can use the very enormous power that you have to decide that you can't do something about it. And most people are using their very powerful, innate, godlike beingness to create situations that they don't want and reasons why they can't change it. You can create anything with your intention. You can either create, this is where all the way back to why is it that the Tony stuff and all this other stuff, quote unquote, works or resonates, is because it's like the surface level of the universal truths that we all know because they are us. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going pretty deep here. So the truth is, just like temperature is temperature, any event is just an event, no matter how catastrophic. There aren't like, except if this happens, rules. No matter how fucked up, universally it has to be there. And even if I'm wrong, what's the alternative? Believe that it's just we're fucked and be a victim? At the very worst, it's a philosophy of a way to look at things that is actually empowering, because in life we're either cause or effect. And most people, especially if they aren't where they want to be, don't have the experiences that they want to be, they're effect rather than cause. And as a business owner, how many of you guys think you'll go very far just being an effect? Okay, how many of you would rather be cause over everything? Say yes? Holy shit. Give you an example. How many of you guys have ever been dumped? Say yes. How many of you guys, when that happened, you were like, this is fucked up, this sucks? Say yes. So your initial reaction was, this is bad. So you threw it over there on the left side of the spectrum and said, this is bad. But how many of you guys who got dumped and that was bad are now either single and you love it or with somebody that you love more? Say yes. Amazing. You mean to tell me that wasn't bad after all? The whole time it wasn't bad? That's the truth. That's the truth. So maybe it caused you to potentially get yourself, how many of you guys after you got dumped actually went to the gym, got in better shape, and you were like, I'm gonna change my life now? Anybody? Just me? All right, cool. How many of you guys have, especially guys, anybody have a circle of friends where like the one dude like gets a girlfriend and like totally disappears for a year and a half, and then they break up and it's, oh, here's Kevin again. Anybody ever have that experience? Yeah, right? Potentially, it allows you to reconnect with people who are your old friends, help you meet somebody new. Finally, how many of you guys have been in a relationship where you didn't feel like you could be yourself and you were walking on eggshells? Anybody have that experience? Say yes? Right. That sucks. So now maybe you're, oh, finally, I can fart in the kitchen. Like whatever it is that you like to do, now you can do without fear of judgment. So it's the point. Everything has two sides. All the time. All the time. There's no exceptions. Everything's perfectly balanced. My favorite definition of wisdom is the speed at which you're able to see both sides and neutralize an event or circumstance and transcend it. So when we talk about transcending it, I draw the diagram. We got this mind thing with the positive, with the negative down here that's like this battery. That's the mind. The real you is the guy who's transcended this, or woman, or the real you is gender neutral. Not to be all woke and shit on you, but you've just taken over this body. Congratulations. But you've seen different variations of the same type of drawing. Bob Proctor has his own way of drawing circles and bubbles like that. It's all the same stuff, just communicated a little bit differently, okay? Next, anybody can change and change quickly. So we know that you're the awesome sauce. You got this mind that kind of comes in, causes us to do dumb shit, has us look at stuff that sucks. How many of you guys have ever heard, oh, it's just like a really long, lifelong change price, little by little. We got to just systematically, we got to work through it. Therapists love to tout this. It's just like, how many of you guys have ever heard of somebody being with a therapist for 25 years and they're still the same fucked up person they were 25 years ago, right? Anybody can change and change quickly. I'll give you a perfect example. You've all done it. How many of you guys have, up until you were 3 or 4, you pooped your pants? Say yes. Only one of you. You just came right out. Okay, thank you. I was going to say, this is an impressive crowd you've assembled. So it was positively reinforced. It was this awesome thing. And you put it over here on the positive end of the spectrum. Your parents cleaned you up, told you how cute you were, snuggled you. It was this great experience. You all giggled together and it was fantastic. And then around 3 or 4, you got introduced to a new set of data called a toilet. And you were introduced some drawbacks. Your parents sat you down and they said, good boys and girls, they don't poop their pants. If you want to go to school, you can't be pooping your pants. It's dirty, it's smelly, it's messy. We can't be doing that. And so there was a moment where the benefits of pooping your pants and the drawbacks of pooping your pants equaled each other. That shit canceled out and you were like, you know what? I'm going to make the confident, rational decision to shit in a toilet. And you did, and you've done it ever since. And barring some accident or illness, you have not had to pray about it, go to therapy for it. You have not had to write goals every morning on, I'm going to poop in a toilet today. You have not had to do affirmations in front of the mirror and say, I am a toilet shitter. You haven't had to identity shift and say, I'm a toilet shitter, I'm a toilet shitter. You haven't had to suppress the urge not to. You haven't had to take drugs for it. You haven't had to read hundreds of books about it. You haven't had to meditate 15 minutes a day to get yourself to not to shit in a toilet. You haven't had to do any of that. You haven't even had to think about it. Right? It's a long-lasting decision. And it's a supportive thing, right? Imagine if you were still just shitting your pants, right? It'd be rough for probably all of us because we could smell it right now. You know what I mean? It would disrupt everything. And you're not even thinking about that, are you? So it's a long-lasting, confident, rational, truthful decision that's the best, the greatest good for the greatest number. And as silly as that example is, how come when we want to make a decision about whether it's firing somebody or saying the thing that we know we should say in our talk or showing up for our family, for our team, we get this, oh God, I guess, right? There's just this little weight that we're dragging, right? This little resistance that shows up, this little thing that wants to fight, whereas that doesn't come up with shitting in the toilet, right? It's because there's still some imbalances there. As slight as they may be, the more of those that exist, the more kind of fucked up decisions that we make. And you can still get pretty far and be pretty financially successful, have a lot of shit, but if you're like Adolf Merkel, you can become a billionaire and still pretty fucked up mentally, if you want to call it that, and have your mind say, you know what, the best thing to do is to throw yourself in front of a train. So we have a whole series of tools that essentially what we do is we take a whole inventory of all the shit in the mind. We have a process of doing that. Eli's about to start going through that as well. And we eliminate, seek and destroy all of this shit one by one. All right? And how many of you guys have heard the grinding, struggling, 10x, punch everybody in the mouth solution for being successful in life? Say yes? Yeah, motherfucker. There you go. Right there. And how many of you guys have ever been like, okay, today's the day. This is my week. I'm going to do it. And you fucking do your moves and all the shit. And then you go crush it for that day. And then the next day, fucking nothing. Anybody ever have that experience? Say yes? Right. So what the fuck is that? Why does that happen? It's because the mind shows up and it says, wait a minute, all sorts of reasons why we can't do that. And you essentially, mental drunkenness kicks in. So short term, sure. But you don't want to be the guy who has to absolutely just do all that shit every day. Why wouldn't you rather just like poop in a toilet naturally and not have to like, okay, we're going to do it now. Today's the day. Imagine doing that every day to reinforce a decision and then force it into a habit. You didn't do that. You just decided one day that like, oh, this actually, yeah, I get it. It's just been permanent, right? So all of the habit building thingy things, not that there's not value there. I'm just saying it's not, you don't have to get out the manual crank every 5 minutes for every change that you want to make. You don't have to force it and just force yourself to do it for 21 days. So let me ask you, how many of you guys want to be more positive? Yeah. All right. Well, unfortunately, I led you into that one because positivity is a trap. Secret 6. Cute, huh? So people come to me like, hey, I know I need to think positive. I know I need to be a positive thinker. How can I think more positive, John? And I said, remember, the truth is balanced. Being a positive thinker is not addressing the truth. And so people are like, oh, how would I think then? If it's not positive, then it's not negative. Like, what do I do? You're not thinking at that point. Just like you don't think to go take a shit. You just go take a shit. Do you think about it? No. You're just like, this is what we do, right? A very good one is the more you're just looking and observing and being present. This is what Eckhart Tolle's trying to do with that long-ass book that kind of leads nowhere, The Power of Now. He's essentially saying that in his Eckhart Tolle's. I just made that up, but it makes sense. So the truth is balance. So it's if you're an alcoholic or got a bit of a problem, and then you go and try and balance that out with a bunch of cocaine. You might have an interesting evening, but is that a long-term sustainable solution? No. This is what happens if you're really upset and you go to a fucking event and you get all jazzed up to try and solve that. That's wonderful. And here we go, I get to shit on a very popular viewpoint is live with passion, right? Gotta be passionate. Passion is defined as a strong and barely controllable emotion. How many of you guys want a strong and barely controllable emotion? You want a barely controllable?
I want it barely controlled. I just want to be unleashed into the wild.
Wow, that's fascinating. That explains a lot. So when you're extremely passionate, you're mentally coked up. Passion, broken down as pass ion. An ion is an atom or a group of atoms that has acquired a net electric charge. Net, meaning not zero. It has a net positive or a net negative, and therefore it has mass. And it does that by gaining or losing one or more electrons. Interesting. And it's passing ions back and forth. It's not getting rid of them, it's not neutralizing them, it's passing them. So when you get this buzzing of energy, let's say you're really depressed and your friend fucking jacks you up and you go dancing and fucking whatever, you're now like, oh, we got some energy, we got some movement. So, yeah, you're passing some ions. Where they're going, we don't know. But they're passing, I guess, congratulations, they're passing. But we don't know where they're going. They're not under control. How many of you guys would like your business to be under control? Say yes. How many of you guys feel as though if you bring a barely uncontrollable thing to your energy, to your business, that your business will be under control? No. So your business starts with you and the energy that you bring to your business. If it's not under control, how many of you guys have seen, probably a number of you, especially in this fucked up industry, you get people who are like, yeah, launch new offer, it's gonna be great, cash grab, fuck the clients, we're gonna go do this. And then you hear all the little background stories. That's what I get to hear, is all the little background stories and all the shit behind everybody's business. Because all the people come to us and they're just like, I don't know, is there any hope for this industry? Is it the whole thing's fucked? It's just like, it can be depressing. Like I hear a lot of it. And the reason is because you have a whole bunch of passionate owners that fucking just charge in a direction and 10x their action and take massive, and they just fucking bowl everything over because they're passing their ions all over the place. It's not under control. So Warren Buffett, if you can't manage your emotions, you can't manage your money. And by the way, as a body note, Warren's 8 million years old and he eats McDonald's and Dairy Queen and drinks Coke every fucking day of his life. Whereas how many of you guys have ever heard the stories of the 40-year-old vegan yoga teacher that does everything perfectly healthy by the book and goes on weekends to make sure that everybody else does very healthy things too and pulls in cancer and dies in 60 days and everybody goes, that's just one of life's mysteries. Anybody ever heard one of those stories that the vehement health nut just pulled into cancer and nobody knew where the fuck it came from? It's because it's less about directly addressing the car and you have to address the driver. Does that make sense? Whereas Warren, he's chill as fuck, super successful, not severely up, not severely down, eats like a fucking kindergartner, and he's still kicking hard, right? So why? It's because people get infatuated. Infatuation is a state of being carried away by an unreasoned passion. So again, it's like having a bunch of alcohol and trying to balance it out with a bunch of cocaine. In other words, imagine you have an old rotting barn. Instead of, hey, let's rebuild the barn and get the mold out of the wood and all the shit. You know what? Grab the thickest few buckets of white paint you can find and let's start a painting. And it might look better, but that bitch is rotting on the inside and you fucking know it. Anybody ever meet somebody that's just like, hi, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. I'm just so happy to be here and I'm just all grateful. Are you grateful today? You should be grateful and outstanding. You're only good. You should be outstanding because I'm outstanding and I'm so grateful. Have you ever met that person? Anybody? Right? And you're just like, now how many of you guys have met that person actually feel like that's their real authentic self? Anybody? No. There's something else rotting underneath there and it's fucking obvious and it smells. And the problem is if you just keep thinking that white coats of paint and more cocaine, it might look better and it might buzz around more. But is that the long-term sustainable solution? Is that really the solution that you want? Something to think about. They're living in a delusional fantasy land. And when you ignore the negatives or drawbacks, you're being delusional. You can't just look at the positive, obviously. Nobody wants to be this guy. The everything's great, super fantastic. It's like the meme of the guy with the little cartoon where the shit's burning down in the back and this is fine, right? He's thinking positive, right? This is the source of any compulsion. So an irresistible urge to behave in a certain way, especially against one's conscious wishes. How many of you guys have done stuff or are still doing some things that you're constantly, yeah, I should stop doing that, but just one last little time here. It'll be all right. I'll stop next week. It'll be okay. It's not a problem. But you really, if you had a real full control over it, you'd just be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And you wouldn't. That's the source of compulsion. And so it's also the source of rose-colored glasses, an optimistic perception of something, a positive opinion, seeing something as positive in a positive way, often thinking of it as better than it actually is. So this is risky advice. See it as better than it is. Look at it and think positive. What's the best that could happen? That's awesome. But how many of you guys experienced some sort of a cryptocurrency loss or knew somebody who has in the last couple of years? Anybody buy Dogecoin and get on that train? Or what was the stock? GameStop, AMC, that stuff. All of that is fueled by, we're going to get rich. This is the best opportunity ever. We can't lose. The market's roaring. Everything's going digital. Everything's going online. That currency sucks. This is a no-brainer. Y'all are morons for not investing more. That's been like the narrative for the last 3 years until very recently. Those people have had their pendulum swing, so to speak. And then they lose everything, and they feel like this guy. This is why Warren Buffett, if you can't manage your emotions, you can't manage money. And he's worth now $106 billion. And Zuck fell off the map because he's fucking over all of us on his ads. But there's also a way of balancing out infatuations. Okay? So the real you is not infatuated or too up, is not depressed, fearful, angry, resentful, frustrated. That's not the real you. The real you is above all of that. However, in order to operate in the physical universe, you need something to do, because if everything canceled its way out, the physical universe, this right here is positive and negative particles, this solid mass right here. So if that all got canceled out, the whole physical universe would disappear and there'd be nothing to do. So us as beings, we want to create games, and the physical universe is a game. In order to have a game, let's assume a game, let's say it's a game of basketball. It requires a goal. And how many of you guys have played basketball or are familiar with the game of basketball? Excellent. So how fun would it be to play an entire 48-minute game of basketball against a team of infants? 48 minutes. You got to like full referees, everything. You got to take the ball out, and they're just like they're just crawling around. But you got to play all 48 minutes. It'd be fucking excruciating, frustrating. Why? Is because it's imbalanced. And so that's why we like to set challenges that are just barely winnable. Like you want to play against a team that's like a pretty equal match. And we like close games. Is because the universe is held together by equal and opposite poles, but just slight imbalances. And as a being, try this on. You created the physical universe and created this dichotomy. The book Conversations with God, book 1, explains this in a very nice, eloquent language. Would recommend it. It's not religious. It's just more spiritual, if you will. All of this stuff we're talking about is spiritual, if you want to put it in that bucket. But essentially, a dichotomy was created because imagine you're the ultimate powerful being. You're it. But there's no way to show the effect of your power. It's pretty useless, right? So we got to create something where I can poke here and that moves and we go, oh, that was cool. I caused that. Because when you create an effect in your business, how many of you guys have had a record month or a big exit, or you coached a team member and they had a win and you felt better about your life, them, yourself, how to win like that? Say yes? The reason you feel good is because you created an effect that you deliberately, intentionally wanted to have. And so you created your own little game. And was there obstacles? Sure. That's what made the game fulfilling to quote unquote win. And so we're always creating games. Your ability to influence will be dependent on how big of a game that you're playing. So for example, the game that a homeless person is playing is hopefully I can find my next meal in a trash can. Is that a big game or a small game? Small. Elon Musk trying to put people on Mars, go all electric, save the planet, buy Twitter and change everything. Is that a big game or a small game? Big game. So the bigger a game that you're playing, not only the more money you make, the more influence that you have, but the more power you have, right? And so it's up to you. The homeless guy created that game for himself. His mind heavily influenced him because he's been mentally drunk for a while, probably physically drunk as well for a while, which also doesn't help. But the mind will either allow us to create a game as big as we really are, or tell us that we're going to create a very small game, like you're wrong about that point, you're an idiot, and argue about that, and like the people are like holding grudges for years in relationships. Small games, very small game. And there's two ways to get a result in anything. It's consciously or reactively. Cutely, the bulletproof way of getting results. How many of you guys have ever heard that if you associate enough pain with something and enough pleasure with getting the thing, that you'll get somebody to move in that direction? Yes? It's a lot of what is taught, and not to say that it doesn't work, but that's exactly how they get cows to move. They prod them in the ass with a cattle prod, and they dangle some food, and lo and behold, they move. And I'm looking around this room, and I do not hear any moos or see any cows. Does anyone hear a cow? No. You're an infinitely intelligent, conscious being. And the fact that you think that you have to motivate yourself or get yourself to move by installing cattle prods and dangling fucking food in front of you is just invalidating your power. You're better than that. You don't have to treat yourself as a cow. You're more than a cow. It's a beautiful part of being a human being. Cow is just a cow. You're an infinitely intelligent, conscious being that has a lot more power than you're demonstrating, and you know it. If you can't manage your emotions, you can't manage money. Who would you rather be, Leonidas or Neo as an entrepreneur? Who would you rather be? Neo. Why? Say again? Bends reality to his will. What was your answer? He's the one. And why not Leonidas? Case in point, right? So Leonidas had a lot of pain and a lot of infatuations with, I don't care, we're going to go fucking kill him even though we're totally outnumbered and we're going to die. Like, it's okay, cool. Infatuation. Do you want to be the alive guy that commands the universe, or the dead guy that needs to hold on to an infatuation knowing that you're going to go and die and totally like fuck over the rest of the Greek community, basically, right? Not the greatest good for the greatest number, but cool movie, but what held that in place was an infatuation and a lot of pain. Whereas Neo escaped the Matrix, which is the only place that infatuations and pain exists. The structure, the physical universe is the Matrix. It's held together by charged particles. So if you're able to exteriorize from that, now you can control the Matrix from an exterior point of view instead of being controlled by it from a reactive interior point of view. Does that make sense? So the whole point here is when you get rid of all this shit, or a huge chunk of it, all of you have experienced this to some degree when you create anything. When you're like, how many of you guys have ever been in flow state? Say yes. When you're in flow, that's the real you. That's the real you. You're not thinking. You're just doing. You're just creating. That's the real you. So when people talk about tapping into flow state, you're already in flow state. You're just most of the time using your flow state to create some bullshit small game for yourself instead of a magnificent creation that does good for the planet and others and yourself. Does that make sense? So it's not about tapping into it. You're already it. There's nothing to tap into. There's no combination to figure out. You're already it, okay? And so that's ultimately what I hope to get across. You have two options in life. If you're not where you want to be and you're feeling some way you don't want to feel, we'll call that mental drunkenness. In other words, we got some on the alcohol side. And if you're doing something to cover that up, compensate for it, if you will, you're trying to balance it out with a bunch of cocaine. And how many of you guys think that's a long-term sustainable solution? No. So wouldn't it be better to just get rid of both of those and just be the real you? Yeah? So the mind finally is like a tangled ball of yarn. So all this stuff is interconnected with each other. So the white picket fence and pain in right arm for that little girl is also connected with the feeling of mom not being there to rescue me immediately to prevent the bite. And that probably will influence her decision as to whether or not she will want to be a mother. And it could influence fertility issues because she believes she shouldn't get pregnant because she couldn't protect her kid, because all of that is, you see where all this goes? All of it connects like that, okay? And that's why you can't just take out, those of you who've done like one little thing to go and handle like one of these little strings, you're like, oh, felt a little relief. There's still this tangled mess. Like picture like your grandma's old sewing kit up in the attic that's collected dust and dirt and fucking bugs and shit in it, right? That's the mind. How many of you guys have ever felt like your mind felt like that? This is, right, flies fly out of it and shit. You're like, what the, dust this bitch off, right? It's a mess. Or try to how many of you have tried to untangle an extension cord mess? Anybody have, right? Anybody try to do that? It's a bitch. So the good news is, yes, they're all interconnected, but to make permanent changes, the entire ball needs to be untangled. But also, just like when you untangle the extension cords, the first few, it's like impossible, right? But then you get towards the end, and as you go and you methodically just start removing these things, you notice how it just starts to break up easier and easier, and before you know it, it's untangled. And once it's untangled, the only way to tangle it back up again is what? Somebody has to go and actually physically tangle it again, do they not? It doesn't just tangle itself up, does it? No. The problem is most people won't actually go through, nor do they know what to go through to untangle the whole thing. And so what we do, and what I went through for 2.5 years, 4 days a week, 6 hours a day, is not only the inventory of all the shit. So for example, fear of failure, imposter syndrome, guilt that I'm not doing my best, resentment of my team, anger that I'm not further along, frustrated that my family is not supportive, doubt that I can make it to the next level, infatuation with moving quickly, feeling judged for my content, fear of rejection, fear of letting my team down, fear of letting my family down, resentment of my parents, guilt that I'm procrastinating, guilt that I'm not there for my family, and that's just the tip of the fucking iceberg. Anybody have some semblance or know somebody who does of some of those items? Yes, we all have them. And so what we do is we take a whole inventory of all that shit, and we have a series of tools that one by one, it's like going to the mental gym, very specifically shifts all these perspectives, if you will, clears these charges as we call it, and all it is asking the right questions in the right order about the right things. What I really like about what Eli, Tony, all this stuff is the power of questions is very important, obviously. Most people are asking, if you don't have the results that you want, you don't feel the way you want to feel, is you aren't asking the right questions about the right things in the right order. But if you do ask the right questions about the right things in the right order, you can shift somebody's perspective from I'm not going to buy your shit to I'm going to buy your shit. And if you're efficient with that and systematic with that, you can do it predictably, right? Same way, all of these are just perspectives. And there's overarching general perspectives, there's sub-perspectives, just like we talked about with the chain of the girl getting bit by the dog. All of these have perspectives, conscious and subconscious. We've done a damn good job in putting together a system where we take the inventory of both the conscious and subconscious, and we assign essentially a tool depending on what type of charge, if you will, it is. Ask the right questions in the right order about the right things, systematically blow these bitches up and untangle that mess. And on average, our clients basically double their business just in the first 90 days, just by getting out of their own way, essentially sobering up their minds and just demonstrating the power that they already know they have within them. Make sense? So ultimately, you're it. And so we handle all these three things. If you guys want to get one of those tools, you can scan that if you haven't yet. And I have no idea where I'm at on time, but I figured I'd open it for some questions.
Awesome. There we go.